Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Realizing 4.7 billion euros in incremental revenue and cost savings through real-time self-service, presented by AsiaInfo-Linkage. I'm Dawn Bushhouse, editor at TMForum. The presentation portion of today's webinar will run about 45 minutes and will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A session. Any questions that we do not have time to answer during our live event will be answered via email after the presentation. This webinar will be available to watch again on demand on the TMForum website, and slides will be available for download as well. Our speaker today is Dr. Andy Tiller, Vice President of Product Marketing for Asiainfo-Linkage. Andy has more than 15 years of experience in the telecom industry, and he has an excellent presentation prepared for you today. Andy, I'll turn it over to you now so we can get underway.
Thank you very much indeed, Dawn. Hello, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about how real-time self-service is bringing big benefits to mobile operators in Asia and North America, and explore a little bit the potential impact it could have if it was deployed more widely in Western Europe. First, a very quick word about Asiainfo-Linkage, for those of you who don't already know us. We're a leading provider of telecom software solutions and IT services, primarily in Asia. We're headquartered in Beijing, and we provide BSS and OSS products and services which serve nearly 1 billion subscribers throughout the region. One of the reasons we're talking about real-time self-service is because we see a lot of these innovations taking place first or fastest in the Asian market, and we think that this has something to offer to operators in the West. Okay, so first of all, some history. 15 years ago, I joined the billing software company Geneva Technology, based in Cambridge in the UK. And in those days, we were all talking about the need for real-time billing, which is what we now call real-time charging, where the customer's charges for using services are decremented from their account or their balance as they occur. So in other words, the charges are being made during the call or during the data session. And of course, this was essential for prepaid customers, but in those days, prepaid was really always handled separately by intelligent network systems, not by the IT systems which manage the postpaid subscribers. So despite all of the exciting capabilities which we were advertising, such as the ability to converge prepaid and postpaid customers onto a single system, in those days, the use of IT systems for real-time applications was actually quite rare. After a few years with Geneva, I left to work in other parts of the telecom ecosystem and came back 18 months ago to join Asiainfo. And the first thing I realized was that not a huge amount had changed in the BSS industry, but one thing that really had moved on was the actual use of real-time IT systems to improve customer experience, including converging pre- and postpaid. So it is actually happening now. And I know the benefit of this personally, from personal experience. When I made my first visit to our company headquarters in China, I visited the IT department to get my email configured on my iPhone, and they switched on data roaming to make sure it was working properly, and I returned to my desk. And by the time I got back to my desk, about 3 or 4 minutes later, I noticed that I already had 3 messages arrived from Vodafone. The first 2 were warning messages, and then the third one said, "You've now reached the £100 limit on your data roaming spend, and we've cut you off." Apparently, I had managed to download a bit over 30 megabytes of data, my email, at about £3 per megabyte while walking from the IT department back to my desk. So I was pretty impressed that the bill shock warning system was actually working in real time all the way from the UK to China. But nonetheless, it was still actually a bit of a shock, as you can imagine. So £100 in less than 5 minutes. But bill shock, of course, is one of the important use cases for real-time charging, and that's now actively deployed by most operators. In some regions, it's mandated by regulators for data especially. But there are actually many other applications of real-time charging and real-time policy control. And those, for instance, include the ability to buy data products on the fly, either bolt-on packages or pay-as-you-go services. Buying Facebook access by the hour is a popular service in Asia. So these, of course, rely on real-time because you have to provision the service immediately, charge for the service in real time, and cut the user off when they've finished their allowed access, what they bought. So that's one application. The second is shared data plans. Now, these rely on more than just real-time self-service, but real-time is very important for shared plans because if you're sharing them with other people or across different devices, it's very difficult to know how much you've used or how much the group has used, which data is used, and how much is left in the plan. So the important use of real-time self-service is so that people can see in real time how much is left. And so that's an important enabler for shared plans. And these, of course, have been very popular in America and have been very successful there, and we'll see more of that later. Thirdly, real-time policy control now allows bandwidth or other quality service parameters to be boosted temporarily for specific services for specific customers. So, for instance, a customer could order a turbo boost for video when they want to watch a movie, just for a short period of time as and when they need it. So these temporary bandwidth boosts are now technically possible. In practice, they've not been widely used yet, as far as I can tell, but they are technically available, and the charging and policy systems are capable of supporting them. And related to this, there's also the ability for an operator to offer real-time subscriptions to relevant services based on the subscriber's usage behavior or context. So if a customer is making calls to international numbers, an operator could immediately offer them a one-click subscription to a plan which is suitable for international calling. And those types of things rely on real-time analytics, which is a related topic but slightly separate. So maybe we can come back to that during the Q&A session if people are interested. One common theme with all of this is self-service. It's the ability for the end customer to actually enable all of these services or order these services in real time for themselves without having to ring the call center or go into a retail store and ask for help. And these days, real-time self-service is often achieved using a smartphone application on a handset. And here we see a number of examples. For instance, we've got My Verizon and My AT&T from North America. We've got an app called My Airtel from India. 3 from Italy. We've got My 190 from Vodafone, My 119 from TIM, and then we're back to the usual naming convention of My Wind. So not particularly original on naming, and these apps essentially all do very similar things. They give customers a real-time view of their usage and the ability to order things in real time, data products especially. So let's take a look at one example of that from DiGi in Malaysia. So DiGi is using Opera's WebPass application, which allows customers to use specific websites, access specific websites for a limited time period at a fixed price. So, for example, you can select to have 1 hour of Facebook for the equivalent of about 10 euro cents. Or if you want to access a higher bandwidth service, such as YouTube, which is going to consume more data, then you'd probably pay a higher amount per hour for that. But the point is that you can order these services in real time. They're specific to one application or website, and the end customer does it for themselves from an application on the smartphone. So this is a good example of real-time self-service. A lot of these services exist today, but we're going to look at a few video clips which show some ideas for how these capabilities can be extended, and in fact how they are being extended today in Asia. For a start, let's see. One of the useful applications for real-time self-service is to see how much data you've got left in your bundle. So I can see that. You should be seeing a video now which shows a bottle with data in it. And but what if my friend is running out and I've got plenty left? Wouldn't it be nice if I could just select my friend from my address book and then pour him or her some data? And now I've got 350 megabytes left, and my friend immediately has 50. And this is happening in real time. The clever bit is not the gimmicky bottle at the front end and the pouring of the data. The clever bit is that at the back end in the charging system, my data balance is being decremented and my friend's data balance is being incremented in real time so that my friend can use the new data straight away. So this is a good example of a real-time self-service application. But what if I want to transfer 70 megabytes instead of 50, or transfer some minutes or something else? And why would the operator be interested in letting me do this anyway? So you should now be seeing a video clip which shows a menu in the real-time self-service app with more interesting options. I can click to transfer something to someone in my address book on the same network, anything I like, for example, voice minutes or Skype credit. And you can see there's a small transaction charge for doing this. So there's a win-win for the operator and for me. And it doesn't have to be just minutes or megabytes or text, the traditional resources that are available from the operator. You can make it service-specific. So it could be Facebook access or YouTube or Skype or Spotify or anything that I have some credit in the charging system. So what's in it for the operator? Well, there's the transaction charges, convenience charges, if you like. An operator could choose to make these transactions chargeable to the customer who's giving the gift. And there's also the benefit of encouraging groups of friends to use the same network so that they can share resources amongst each other in this way. But what about me? I might be running out of voice minutes, but have plenty of credit left in something else, which I could trade. So, for example, I might have more international direct dial minutes than I need, but I might be desperate for some anytime voice minutes. So with the real-time self-service application, I could trade those resources one for the other at an exchange rate which is decided by my operator. So I can trade valuable international direct dial minutes for less valuable domestic minutes at a predefined exchange rate. And there would be, again, a small transaction charge for that, perhaps, if my operator chooses to charge me for the convenience of trading my balances. Again, all of this relies on a real-time charging engine, which allows the transaction to happen at the back end in real time, so I can immediately start using the new resource. Okay. Another example, what about a family on a shared plan or a shared multi-device plan wanting to set budget controls? So this is the green family, and you can see that Dad, Paul, can use the real-time self-service application to set an overall budget for the family. So here he might set the €100 budget, and he can also set individual budgets for each person or each device, and he can do that right down at the service level. So he can, for example, control the kids' use of specific services, such as Facebook. He sets notifications when the kids are near the limit of what he's set. And if he's feeling really mean, he can actually bar them from using the service beyond that limit. At least he can do that until his daughter Amy gets the password for the real-time self-service app, in which case, of course, Dad is in big trouble. Right, last one. What about changing your monthly postpaid bundle or buying a bolt-on package of minutes, megabytes or text or any other resource? And here you can see how the end customer can personalize the mix of resources they want in their monthly plan, monthly bundle. And the app allows you to show, or even shows a recommendation in red here based on past usage. I'm not sure if you can see that on the video, it's quite small, but based on past usage, the app can recommend how many minutes, megabytes, text, or other resources the customer should have. And this then would be set up in the charging system in real time. And the trick is that the product catalog here would normally get very complicated if you are allowing customers to set their own resources in their monthly plan. But in practice, what you can do is use a trick called parameterized product, where there is actually only one product in the catalog here. And the product contains X minutes, Y megabytes, Z text, and so on. And the parameters X, Y, and Z are held against the customer's account, which makes the product catalog very simple. You can see as the customer changes the number of minutes, megabytes, or text in their bundle, the price changes. And the price changes as well if they change the contract period. This could equally apply if you're just buying a bundle, a bolt-on package, which contains minutes, megabytes, and text, and then the price again would change depending upon how many of each you set. So there needs to be some analysis behind the scenes. The operator sets up the rules for this, how the price should change as you slide the number of minutes, megabytes, and text. But the front end allows the customer to select that in real time. So there's a few examples of what some operators have already begun to deploy in Asia, and which may be also of interest to customers in other parts of the world. Now, one question you might ask is, do customers really want this kind of stuff? How much can customers be bothered to set their own budget controls and so on? And I think the answer is yes, they clearly do. For example, we have research from Yankee Group, which continually measures Net Promoter Scores to reveal how customers rate their experience with service providers across 4 different dimensions. So there's brand, products and services, channel, and delivery. And what you need to know about NPS is that negative values are bad. So the worst score here is actually for the channel experience, and that highlights consumer ratings of the retail store, the mobile phone self-service application, contact center, web self-service. And it turns out that what customers are most unhappy with is the self-service capabilities. Customers want to be able to do more for themselves without having to call the call center or go into the retail store. And the web and phone self-service Net Promoter Scores are actually between -10 and -12%, so they're pretty bad. Actually, if you look across the other measures as well, the other dimensions, products and services and so on, the same message appears. Customers want more personalization of pricing and promotion. They want more control. So there's a clear message here from Yankee's research that customers are looking to take control themselves. They want to use real-time self-service. Analysis from other vendors, other analyst firms backs that up. Gartner has published research which shows that personalization and tariff customization are very important to end customers and can provide differentiation for operators. And Analysis Mason goes even further than that, and they link the capability for customers to serve themselves to an 18% increase in revenue per user. So that's quite an interesting number. So it's suggesting that if you give customers the ability to serve themselves, then not only will that potentially save calls to the call center and time from customer service agents, which is what operators are often motivated by in offering self-service, but also they, as well as that, have the potential for adding increased revenue, increasing the revenues that operators make. And so we thought, at AsiaInfo, we thought that was a very interesting idea, and we set out to see if we could test that further. So what we did was to commission a Swedish consultancy company called Northstream, a specialist company with real experts who dive very, very deep into telecom. And we asked them to carry out some in-depth research into the business case for real-time self-service to see whether it was really, whether we could really back up the work which had been done by Analysis Mason and others. So they did a detailed study. First of all, they studied operators in two reference markets, North America and Asia. And in North America, they looked at the role which real-time self-service had played in supporting shared data plans, which have been hugely successful there for Verizon and for AT&T, enabling those operators to increase data ARPU very significantly, 10% at Vodafone and 20% at AT&T, in fact. And real-time self-service was an important contributor to that. It certainly wasn't responsible for, on its own for all of that ARPU increase, but it was an important contributor. And Northstream, through interviews and analysis, discovered that that it was important for people sharing resources to know how much is left in the bucket. Otherwise, they have no way of guessing how much is left and how much others have used. And real-time self-service available through the smartphone applications not only informed customers of that, but actually also worked as a channel for customers to discover and explore new data services. So that was a beneficial side effect. So Northstream had lots of discussions and interviews with operators about the contribution of real-time and the importance of real-time and the importance of self-service in enabling these increased revenues through shared plans. In Asia, Southeast Asia in particular, Northstream also interviewed operators there and discovered that again, real-time self-service could be associated directly with increased revenue. And here it was much more direct than in America. So operators such as Airtel in India and DiGi in Malaysia essentially have been able to introduce pay-as-you-go data services. So we saw one earlier from DiGi, the ability to access Facebook by the hour for a fixed fee. And that had directly enabled prepaid subscribers to take up data services where they previously had not been using them. And so Northstream did a detailed analysis and discovered that there was a direct correlation. They estimated what fraction of the gains in data ARPU from these operators over the period they looked at could be directly attributed to real-time self-service. And they, again, validated that through interviews and created a model for predicting the potential gains from real-time self-service that could be achieved in other markets by essentially inputting the characteristics of the market, prepay and postpay subscriber percentages, ARPU, and other factors which were relevant. And the sophisticated model, they then took back to operators, revalidated with them to make sure that their analysis was credible. So they produced a model essentially which would allow you to pick a country or a region and estimate and look at the historic data and estimate from that if real-time self-service had been deployed more widely, what would the impact have been on revenue. They also did the same analysis for OPEX as well, for customer care savings. So if customers can serve themselves, the operator would save money from not having to have customers call the call center and take up agent time. And so there was a model for these two aspects of benefits for the business case of for real-time self-service. In their analysis, Northstream picked two particular markets in Europe to estimate what would have happened if real-time self-service had been deployed more widely. So first of all, they chose two contrasting markets. One was Sweden and one was Italy. And they applied the model in detail, again, validating their conclusions through interviews with the operators in those countries. The first market they looked at was Sweden in 2012, which means, what would have happened in the Swedish market if real-time self-service had been deployed to 20% of mobile phone users. So Sweden is predominantly postpaid and an early adopter of LTE, or at least it's early for Europe, not of course early compared to North America and Japan and Korea. But when they applied the model to this particular market with its own characteristics, they could see that the Swedish operators would have seen gains of 120 million euros across the country through increasing deployment of new real-time self-service applications to 20% of their mobile phone users. And 120 million euros equates to about 3% of annual services revenue. So this is what the model said, and through revalidation with interviews with operators, they agreed. So the next market they looked at was Italy, which is very different, predominantly prepaid, with low LTE adoption back in 2012. And again, they applied the same model. They said, what would have happened if real-time self-service had been in use by 20% of mobile phone users back in 2012? And this time, the model shows gains of 5% of annual services revenue, so 807 million euros across Italy. And here you can see that a lot of that was from prepaid customers, because of course Italy is heavily prepaid, but the same kind of effect which is happening in Asia is very relevant there, where prepaid customers who are perhaps reluctant to use data services because their charges are unpredictable can know exactly what they're buying in advance with access to a particular service for a particular time for a fixed price. Once Northstream had done this analysis and revalidated it through interviews with the operators in Sweden and Italy, they then went further and extrapolated the results to the whole of Western Europe. And this is where we get the big number. So the idea was to scale it up and see how much additional revenue and how much additional cost saving an operator could have achieved in 2012 across Europe, all European operators, mobile operators, could have achieved by deploying real-time self-service to 20% of their subscriber base. So the potential gains which they could have made essentially amounted to about 4.7 million in increased revenues and customer care cost savings of an additional 540 million. So over 5 billion in benefits. Now, remember that here there are actually these two different sources for the model. There is two different benefits. There's the benefit of customer care cost savings, and there's the benefit of increased revenue. And a lot of operators, as I mentioned, are primarily motivated by to introduce self-service in order to save costs, save customer care costs. And we can see that actually that represents only about 11% of the potential benefit to the operators in Northstream's model. So 540 million is only 11%, whereas the real benefit comes from the potential to increase revenue through real-time self-service. And that accounts for 89%. Roughly across Europe, roughly evenly balanced between prepaid users and postpaid users, a little bit more for prepaid. So, so that's an interesting finding in itself, that operators may be looking at only a small part of the business case as they plan their self-service projects. Perhaps those projects really deserve larger budgets and more focus, because the potential there is really very, very high. Okay, but the model itself is actually bottom-up. So it's fair to ask the question, where exactly do these revenues come from? You need to dig into the model to see what's actually happening. And as we take a closer look, we can see that a lot of the gains have to do with confidence. If you remember back in the days when prepaid was first introduced, it opened up a market to millions of users who didn't actually previously use mobile phones at all. Well, real-time self-service can have the same impact on mobile data for customers who are not confident about how much it's going to cost them to use data services. And real-time self-service, enabling the customers to take control, to buy just what they want, when they want, gives confidence to customers to use data services where previously they didn't. And that's exactly what's happening in Asia with the ability to buy data services for a fixed period of time and do that in real time. Beyond that, we saw the nice example of pay-as-you-go for cost-conscious prepaid subscribers in Asia, but perhaps in developed markets you might think, well, is that so important? But in developed markets, perhaps the analogous service would be advanced QoS, such as turbo boosting specific applications for particular times. So you could boost your bandwidth for video for a couple of hours in order to watch a movie. You could boost the quality of service for using voice, either voice over IP services, Skype, and so on, or else HD voice, just as you want to use that, and pay for it only when you need it. So those types of applications can directly increase revenue because you're charging the customer immediately for something they get and use right now. Beyond that, we saw the possibility of small transaction fees for services such as transfer and transform, convenience charges, small charges that the end customer pays for being able to send gifts or conveniently trade a balance which they're running out of for one that they have plenty of. And then there are less tangible benefits, such as the impact of real-time self-service as a channel for service discovery, which Northstream found was important in North America. Once the self-service app was on the phone, then customers through the app discovered more data services and began to use them. So in summary, the message of this presentation really is that real-time self-service can be a very good thing. So let's get on and do it. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. So I think we're now able to take some questions and answers. And if you'd like to submit your questions, I will respond to them. I'll read them out and I'll respond to them verbally. Dawn, are you hosting this part, or am I?
Sure. Yes. Actually, let's start with a question. What other elements of the business support system stack are impacted by real-time self-service beyond just charging and policy control?
Thanks very much, Dawn. Actually, that's a very, very good question because I've made it sound a little bit simpler than it really is in practice. Let's take, for instance, the transfer and transform or the personalized price plans. What's very important here is not only that the customer gets what they want in real time, but also that the operator staff can see what's happened. So this has to be recorded in the customer's interaction history. If the customer calls the call center and complains that they transferred 50 megabytes of data, but their friend didn't get it, then that needs to be visible to the staff of the operator. And so there is an impact beyond just the real-time charging and policy control system. There is the need to make what's happening visible to not only the end customer themselves, they can see what they've done, but also to staff. So that's one example. The BSS systems, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, are very complex and very interrelated, and you do need to make sure that that everything is joined up. But fundamentally, if you don't have the real-time charging and policy capabilities, then you can't do these interesting things. When you can do them, you've got to think through the consequences for other parts of the BSS system.
Right. What about real-time analytics? How can real-time self-service make use of analytics, and what's the link between the two?
Yeah, that's another good question. I mentioned that earlier in the presentation. So one of the other big trends in our industry is the ability for operators to understand the context that their customers are in real time and then do something with that context. So big data analytics operating in real time can essentially tell operators this customer's trying to watch a video now in a congested cell, or this customer's making international calls and made 3 in the last, in the last hour, and to provide an ability to respond to that with something useful. It could be anything from a great offer to an apology for something not working properly. So the ability to respond in real time is important, but then you have to have the ability for the customer to respond to that offer. If if the customer is watching a video and the cell's not congested and premium QoS is available, why not make the customer an offer? Get premium bandwidth in your current location for the next 2 hours at for a fixed fee. If you can identify that and make the offer in real time, and then actually provision and bill it, charge it in real time, then you join the whole thing up in a loop. And that's really what I see as the future of real time, the combination of the real-time offers based on context awareness with the capability to provision and charge in real time. You've got something very powerful there.
Great. Well, it looks like we've got some questions coming in here. One question we have is, are any operators using real-time self-service today, or what are some examples of companies that are being successful with this?
Right, yes, there are. And so I mentioned a couple of examples in Asia, the one-time access buy access in real time to Facebook for 10 cents for an hour, that kind of thing. So that's widespread in Asia, that sort of thing, and that's being very successful. Some of the other things, the more visionary things that I mentioned, we're seeing operators very keen to have those very specific examples, and they, some of our customers already have the capability and are now experimenting with how to use it. So they're new, but they're actually real. They're actually being deployed live at the moment. And as with all these new things, there's very powerful capabilities that operators need to experiment with to see what works. If you use technology wrongly, you can damage your bottom line. If you use it right, you can really enhance it. So if you want to allow customers to serve themselves with and order new services, or especially things like transfer and transform, you need to make sure it's profitable. And so I think the capabilities are quite new, but they are really now being experimented with. AsiaInfo's customers our big customer base is in China. We have more than half the market there, and the Chinese operators are quite far advanced on these sorts of things. But also in Thailand, in Malaysia, in other parts of Southeast Asia, we're seeing real-time self-service is becoming very popular.
Okay. We have a question from a service provider. Where did this journey begin with the enterprise? Who were the key stakeholders and project owners by function, group, and title, for example?
Right. Yeah, very good question. If you want to do something like this, if an operator's keen, is it the marketing department that drives it? Is it the finance department? How does procurement get involved? And do they working on the business case and so on? And I guess from AsiaInfo's experience, I mean we tend to do quite large BSS transformation projects, and real-time self-service might be one of the exciting capabilities, which is part of the whole package. But we're seeing a trend towards older systems not being able to support the sort of real-time services operators would like to use, and also being quite expensive to support and maintain. And thinking particularly in Europe, there's a lot of these systems which have been patched and patched again, and at some point you need to change in order to meet the requirement to respond to the new digital economy, essentially. So the ability to add more value to partner services, to respond more quickly to changes. So in the end, the projects that we do tend not to happen until there's enough pain across all departments. The marketing department wants to do things, but is held up by IT. senior management is keen to provide better customer service through context awareness and that kind of thing. The IT department is paying a huge cost to make changes, and the pain just increases across the board. And it seems, in our experience, it's only when the pain is everywhere that there's enough of an incentive to really make the big decision to do a BSS transformation project, because of course it is very risky and very painful. Now, if you wanted to take a different approach and just do a bolt-on IT system for real-time self-service, then of course that is possible. You can have a real-time charging system for data and other services, and you can plug that into your existing PCRF and begin to use real-time self-service capabilities. But as I mentioned before, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because you do have to figure out how the call center agents are going to know what's going on, so it impacts the RM and so on. And before you know it, you have got quite a sophisticated project, so it's not a simple bolt-on. But I think it certainly could be driven by IT and marketing, who agree that this is a great thing and we've got a solution. But in my experience, it usually is a little bit more. You need everybody on board before these things can happen.
Right. We have another question about whether real-time self-service adds value and is applicable in other areas besides mobile, so for cable companies or a wireline operator or internet service provider.
Yes, actually, I think that is of course true. The ability for customers to, of course, we've had video on demand for a long time. You can just select your video and watch it now and pay a charge. It's a good example of real-time self-service. I think mobile does have a few, some extra dimensions which make it particularly interesting there. Especially with the real-time analytics part, your context. The fact it's a personal device, and that you can be in different locations, you can be using different applications on your smartphone. All of that is part of your context. And so if an operator can discover that context in real time, they can make you very interesting offers, which are much more relevant and personalized because it's your personal device than they can for a fixed line. But yes, in general, these things are relevant for any type of network.
Okay. I can combine a couple of questions here, it looks like. One person is asking the cost involved in putting this kind of service in place, and when is there a break-even point, and whether AsiaInfo actually has this capability available today.
Okay. The second part is yes, and the first part is it's a bit of a how long is a piece of string question, because it depends on the scale of the operation, how many subscribers you want to serve in real time, and so on. The business case, of course, has a cost side. What Northstream looked at was the benefit side. How much money could an operator save through customer care costs, and how much additional revenue could be created. But of course, there is the need to deploy a new solution that involves not just the cost of new IT systems, but also system integration, and also the cost of change. You have to train the organization to use the new tools and use them effectively. So there's quite a lot of cost for the business case as well. But I think and that really is how long is a piece of string. So I can't give you a cost of €1 million answer. It really does depend. But I think what the Northstream analysis has shown is that it's worth doing that business case, because the potential benefit is very large, and therefore, it's possibly, I think, from what Northstream has shown, larger than many operators have appreciated, because they're focused on the bit that they can really see, which is the customer care saving. That's the motivation for self-service. But actually, the revenue aspect of it is even more significant. And so, the business case analysis is really worth doing.
Right. Here we have another question from a service provider. Do you have any good examples of utilizing real-time customer data, including location data, to add to the retail experience in a telco?
I can tell you, well, yes, we have, but I'm not sure I can really tell you exactly. I can tell you in general that location is quite important in retail. So you've got obvious cases such as the customer might be due for a contract renewal. Their phone is 18 months old, and you know that they're within 100 meters of your flagship retail store. So you SMS them and say, we've got a great offer for you. Something like that is an example of how you could use a real-time context awareness to benefit the retail store. Well, not necessarily the retail experience, but to drive customers into the store. Once they're in the store, actually there's lots of initiatives to improve the customer experience. When you're in the store, typically the in-store experience for many operators is fairly poor. You actually spend a long time, waiting to be served, and then a long time being served. Often. I'm sure most of us have had those experiences. And there's a lot of initiatives that we're seeing where operators are trying very hard to improve that, especially because you've got a fantastic experience if you go into an Apple store, and the contrast is often very stark. And now, real-time self-service can be directly relevant in the retail store. Customers can do a lot of serving themselves in the store itself. Using a touch screen in China Unicom, for instance, what customers will do when they go into the store is they'll begin browsing through a touch screen. They can look at phones and plans while they're waiting. They can even play games that are available on the phones and use applications using the touch screen, large Android device, basically. And then they can start filling a shopping basket as they would on the web, and press a button to alert an agent who can come over with a tablet and finish the experience. And so actually the ordering process, the waiting process in the store is much more is broken up into a number of steps that keeps the customer occupied and interested. So China Unicom's done a big initiative in that area, which has made a big difference to the experience in their stores. Just one example of I'm aware of some other operators doing similar things as well.
Yeah, there's another question here that if I understand it correctly, I think it's asking about whether people want real-time self-service to buy new data products in developed countries versus developing countries, particularly with the widespread use of Wi-Fi in developed countries. How valid is the new data product in developed countries?
Yeah, that's a good question. But I think before I answer that directly, I should address the issue of developing versus developed. A lot of us in the West, me as well, before I joined AsiaInfo, we're kind of not too aware of what's happening in Asia. We think of Asia as developing, perhaps not so sophisticated. But China is already the world's largest smartphone market. It's the world's largest internet market. You've got some of the world's largest internet companies. You might not have heard of Baidu or Taobao or 360buy, but they've got hundreds of millions of customers, and so it's a very sophisticated market. You've got the same pressure from over-the-top providers, running on the network and putting pressure on the operators. You've got very high use of data. The main difference is that the market's still growing, so we can call it developing. Growth has slowed to about 10%. We're expecting this year from China and in telecoms, but of course, in the West we're at zero if we're lucky. So it's developing. Developing markets are developing in the sense that they're still growing, but some of them are actually already very sophisticated, and with very wide adoption of Wi-Fi as well. So I think what's applicable in Asia is applicable in developing or developed Asia is definitely applicable in Western markets too. You could see the example DiGi in Malaysia using prepaid, buying prepaid data through real-time self-service, and directly applicable in Italy, and an opportunity missed there perhaps with the example that Northstream came up with. So I hope that answers it. I think I would say that real-time self-service is much more relevant in the West than much more directly applicable of what's happening in Asia to the West than many people appreciate. And really that was the message that came through from Northstream findings as well.
Okay. Here we have an interesting question. We have heard a lot about the advantages of delivering real-time self-service. Are there any disadvantages to it?
Well, of course, anything you do in real time costs more than doing it offline. So you need more processing power to do things in real time. And actually, an interesting little anecdote from China. When you scale that up to 700 million mobile subscribers and more, such as China Mobile has, you really need to be clever about how you do it. So one of the things which China Mobile does in Beijing is that they have about 24 million subscribers there, of which 6 million are postpaid and the rest prepaid. All of them are on the same IT-based charging system. But the number of subscribers that are being charged in true real time at any point is only about 3 or 4 million. And the way that works is that there's real-time analytics, which is essentially looking for customers who are moving from a point where 5-minute turnaround on charging is no longer enough, and putting them in real time into the real-time charging system. So even for a prepaid customer, many times the balance is high, they're using services at a slow rate historically, they're not in any danger of running out, and you can afford to leave them in near real time until a warning hits from the analytics system, and then you need to put them into the true real-time system. So cost is a factor, but you can be clever about it, and you can move customers from near real time to real time. That's just one example. Of course, some of the applications I talked about, you need true real time for. So you would have to have the higher cost of processing things in true real time for all customers.
Okay. We had one other question here on is there any impact on service fulfillment when modifying quality of service or other service parameters?
Yes, and I think that's probably the reason why we're not seeing the Turbo Boost offer done more often. In practice, I think what's holding operators back is not that they don't have the technical capability to provision it in real time and to charge it in real time. That's all there. But I think that there's a worry that operators don't necessarily they can't necessarily be sure that they're going to deliver it. If the customer moves into a different cell, then maybe the first cell was uncongested and never goes more than half full. You can be pretty confident that you can deliver high quality of service at such a place. But if the customer is driving or on a train, you don't know where they're going to end up, and by the time they get somewhere else, it may be impossible to deliver what the customer bought. So that's a factor which is important. So the offer made to a customer would have to be in your current location. You can have this Turbo Boost, I think. The second thing is that if the customer then calls the call center and says, "I didn't get what I paid for, I didn't experience any Turbo Boost," then then how on earth does the operator know whether they delivered it or not? So you need to have a system which would be able to verify that the service was delivered. So I think there are some additional complications with this. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually brought up a question that I had as I was listening as to whether real-time self-service is more effective when there is more LTE deployment.
Yes, I think the better the network is, and the easier it is to provision those real-time QoS parameters, the more likely it is an operator can have the confidence to offer services such as Turbo Boost. Actually, I know there are operators on the call. It's a shame that they can't contribute here, because I think it would be very interesting to know what they're thinking on those things is. But my guess is that it's still pretty hard to be sure you've delivered it and that you can deliver it to the customer that ordered it. But with LTE, it should be easier.
Okay, I'm just looking through our questions. It looks like we've covered most of them in some way or another. But if you feel like we haven't answered your question, we'll be happy to follow up after the call. So if there are any other questions, please submit them. If not,
all right. Thank you very much indeed, everyone.